On the 4th of December, Wednesday, the External Affairs Minister of India, Dr. S. Jaishankar, gave a statement in the Rajya Sabha, and he said that there was some improvement in the relations between India and China. In today's gist, we have with us Nitin Gokhale, our editor-in-chief, to give us a perspective about that relationship, especially in the context of history. Nitin, thank you so much for taking out the time.
Pleasure.
This statement, of course, is everywhere, all over the news. But we thought that in today's gist, it is important to, talk about the future of only after, studying the past, right?
Sure.
So we're going to do that now in the next few minutes. Let's start with the big thing. When you think of India and China, your mind first goes to the 1962 war, right? So let's start from there, when actually tensions began, problems began, and China illegally, if I may say, occupied 38,000 square kilometers of Aksai Chin.
Just Aksai Chin, and of course some parts of Arunachal they tried to occupy, but they went back unilaterally in the 62 war, which was a month-long war between October and November 1962. But if I may take you back about 3 or 4 years before that, okay. The tensions really began around 1958-59, and because 1959, the Dalai Lama took asylum in India. He fled Lhasa in March 1959, and since then the Chinese were itching for a fight and teach India a lesson, which they did summarily in the winter of 1962. So that, of course, was a beginning of a period of huge tensions between India and China. It lasted nearly till the 80s, late 70s, early 80s. In between, there was another short skirmish in Nathula in Sikkim, in which India got the better of the Chinese, and that actually in a way turned the tide, because then the Chinese realized that India is not a walkover. They may have had a victory, comprehensive military victory in 1962, but it's not a walkover. So it continued like that until, and then there was another crisis in 1986-87 in Arunachal Pradesh called Sumdarungchu or Wangdung crisis, where again India stood very firm and gave a message to the Chinese that it's no longer a pushover, or it's not going to accept Chinese unilateral attempt to change the status quo. That happened. And then we come to 1988. I don't know whether you are aware of the 1988 trip of then Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi. In December 1988, Prime Minister Gandhi and then Chinese Supreme Leader Deng Xiaoping met in Beijing, and that is seen in the recent times as the breakthrough moment for India-China relations after 1988.
And that was the first visit after many years?
In fact, almost 30 years, I would say, because Mrs. Gandhi, Indira Gandhi, or the Prime Ministers in between never went to China. It was Rajiv Gandhi who went there because the Sumdarungchu incident had just happened, and the Chinese were also trying to concentrate on doing the economic turnaround for the country. Of course, post that there was one bump in the Chinese domestic situation in terms of the Tiananmen Square massacre in 1989. That notwithstanding, from 1988 to 2013 is the period I would think was a peace and tranquility dominated period between India and China.
Right. Lots of agreements were signed, lots of, signatures, and, lots of,
Lots of agreements, lots of pacts, lots of understanding.
Yeah, pacts, that was the word, yeah.
So there was the 1993 Peace and Tranquility Agreement on the border. There was 1996 agreement on how to, the political parameters, they looked at 2003. Then in 2003 they decided to have a new mechanism for border resolution to begin with, called Special Representatives mechanism, where senior government officials or senior nominated officials were supposed to lead the negotiations on the border. That mechanism has now expanded to become or talk about everything under the sun as far as India-China relations are concerned from both sides. But as I said, 2013 was the up to which the Chinese and Indians were quite at peace with each other.
Yes. So what happened? What was the trigger in 2013?
So several things. I mean, 2012, the current Chinese strongman Xi Jinping took over. And then Chinese started feeling more confident about their position in the world, more assertive. They become a larger military, larger economy, and they saw that they needed to correct what they call the mistakes of the history and secure their peripheries. So everywhere they started asserting themselves, pushing themselves more aggressively. Taiwan, Japan, East China Sea, East Japan Sea. In that thing, South China Sea, they started being more aggressive. With India on the border, on the line of actual control, which is what the border is called, they started doing more skirmishes, more aggressive patrolling. And so last decade, plus 1 year, I would think, has been the journey of a downhill slide of a relationship between India and China.
Right. So given that, there's lots to be done, right? Even though now total disengagement has happened, as also the External Affairs Minister said in the Rajya Sabha, a lot more needs to happen. I mean, things are not hunky-dory between the two countries at all.
Not at all. In fact, I don't like to use the word reset, which a lot of people are doing it.
And reset to what? Is it reset to
to
2020? Is it reset to 67, 88? What?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So let's look at what happened in 2013. Then there was a 2014 Chumar incident. There was a
2017
Doklam or Dolam as we call it.
Yes.
And then 2020 was the inflection point where the Galwan incident happened, in which both sides had fatalities. The casualties were fatal. And that just sort of shred all agreements to bits. And then, of course, zero trust completely. India then switched off many of the arrangements, and yet the trade deficit between India and China went up in favor of China, and in fact, India's trade deficit increased with China during this period. During the COVID period, then the COVID happened, and the agreement in Kazan or the meeting between Prime Minister Modi and President Xi Jinping during the BRICS summit in October, where I was also there, has been sort of the starting point of this phase. I am going to say this is a new phase of the relationship, not a reset. Because none of those agreements which I mentioned from 1993 to 2013 are now really valid the way the Chinese have behaved and have disregarded those agreements. So what remains to be done is to restart the process, rebuild the trust, and therefore there's a lot of hard work going forward.
So could one say that going forward, it is again about managing the border rather than resetting the LAC? Could one really say that?
Yes, because India has been asking for clarification of the LAC for quite some years, especially under Prime Minister Modi. Chinese are not interested because that gives them a leverage to keep India off balance, or let India concentrate on the border management.
And never let down its guard.
Never let down its guard, build, spend more money on the military, on infrastructure. So they feel that it bleeds India in a way economically. But I want to draw the viewer's attention to one fact, that the process of restarting the ties has just begun. In the sense that bilateral meeting at the highest level happened. They directed the special representatives. In our case, India's case, it is National Security Advisor Ajit Doval. In China's case, it is their Foreign Minister Wang Yi. And then the Foreign Secretary on the Indian side and their Vice Foreign Minister on the Chinese side would also meet for a lower level engagement. But these are just green shoots, I would say. This is nothing that we should be complacent about. because the restarting of the process will have to culminate in some new agreements, new protocols on the border, new arrangements for patrolling. All that will have to happen. That's just the border. But imagine there are other strategic aspects to India-China relationship. Chinese think India is now completely in the US camp, in the Western camp, and therefore
Quad.
because of Quad, Indo-Pacific, and all kinds of things, and therefore they are doing the bidding of the Americans to contain China. India has not been able to convince China so far that it is not so, that we have an independent foreign policy, we deal with all our friends and adversaries and acquaintances or people with whom we have only working relationship on an individual basis.
Strategic autonomy.
That's the word used. But just look at how India deals with Russia on the one hand and with the US on the other. Absolutely. Or with Ukraine and Russia on both sides of the coin. Yeah. But that is going to be the work which the NSA as special representative will have to do to convince the Chinese leadership or the interlocutors that we are not a stooge of the Americans.
There has been persistent disagreements as far as the LAC is concerned. Right. There has never been a point where both sides have agreed on anything, which is why we actually don't have an international border.
Right.
How do you think going forward with all this that has happened, do you ever think a solution will be found? Because like you said, the geopolitics is changing and one has to consider that India and China, they are huge trading partners. But as far as this issue is concerned, this disagreement, do you ever think it will change?
No, it's a game of maps. And the Chinese say our maps from the ancient times say this. We say we go by the 1914 agreement at Shimla between the then British Raj or the British government, the Chinese and the Tibetans. There are 3 lines there actually they talk about on the map. LAC, the line of actual control. Chinese claim the 1959 line. There is a Johnson and McCartney line. There is the Chinese claim line. There's an Indian claim line.
And there's something in between.
In between. So that is very difficult. I don't see this. And actually, at one point, Deng Xiaoping had said when he wanted this settlement to happen and didn't happen for various reasons, then said, let's leave it to the future generations, not even the next generation, but the future generations, the settlement of the border.
But whenever anything has to go wrong between the two countries, the border has to always be the flashpoint, right?
It will be the front and center of the dispute.
So the 3 Ds that you talk about, and that the first is of course disengagement, and the second is de-escalation.
Yes.
Now these 2 things have happened.
Not the de-escalation.
Not the de-escalation.
It has started apparently. But that's why I'm surprised by the statement from the Ministry of External Affairs on Thursday, which talked about the another mechanism that is there called WMCC, the working mechanism on consultation and coordination that they have between India and China, where they say all issues pre-2020 have been resolved, or something of words to that effect. Now that, to my understanding, that has not happened, because India's ask has always been, and even External Affairs Minister Jaishankar's statement in the Parliament says that we have only finished the disengagement wherever it was remaining in Depsang and Demchok. But de-escalation will be the next step. This is what he says.
He says in the Rajya Sabha.
In the Rajya Sabha, in the statement is an elaborate statement. And now then to have this statement, I'm a little confused about this written statement by the MEA on Thursday at the conclusion of the WMCC, which happened in Delhi. I expect the special representative level talks to happen at the end of this month. Whether NSA Dole travels to China or they come here, we don't know. At least I don't know. But that is likely to happen this month. And that is where I think the next steps will be clear. How are we going to go about it in trying to rebuild trust? Even not restart, but rebuild trust. First steps towards rebuilding trust between India and China.
What is the third D?
That is de-induction, which means especially for the Chinese forces which came from Xinjiang and Tibet, their permanent bases, they must de-induct from Aksai Chin, where they are right now deployed. So disengagement is ending the face-off. You go back 1.5 kilometers or 2 kilometers so that you are not eyeball to eyeball. De-escalation means that you take away some of those infrastructure that you put up in Aksai Chin, and the kind of temporary bases that you put up, you dismantle them, go back. And de-induct means you completely go back to your permanent basis and come for the exercise whenever you come.
Do you see that happening?
Not immediately. So like if I go by the External Affairs Minister's statement that de-escalation is yet to begin or has just begun. So it will take at least another 2-3 months, 4 months. And then in the summer we might expect the de-induction after the Chinese, who annually do an exercise like the Indians do on their side of the border, in Aksai Chin. After that, if they go back, then it's called de-induction. So we have a long way to go.
And there is a fourth D, which is demarcation.
Well, that's a long way off. I don't think I'll see it in my own lifetime, but that's okay.
That's like for the future generations to figure out.
Yes.
But yeah, so thank you, Nitin, for that overall perspective. And yeah, I think you're right about this whole the Ds, the disengagement and the de-escalation. That there seems to be a little bit of a confusion there. But I thought it is important for us to again revisit history, and then sometimes we forget about so many
and
things.
Many of our viewers may not have the
full picture
so
many decades
or interest in knowing this, so we thought we'll just put it out there.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that. And viewers, I hope you have an understanding of very briefly, of course, of how things have been since 1962. And like Nitin said, of course, having a fixed international border between the two countries would be ideal, but when that will happen is, of course, it'll take years and years. But right now, the trust needs to come back. Things need to get back on track. No violence. There has to be a complete cessation of violence. I think that should be the prime objective of both the nations. So that's it from me. Thank you so much for watching. Please make sure to like and share this video, and don't forget to subscribe to our channels and our social media handles. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.